at alternatives to China. But we are not alone in this race. I mean, there are many countries which could also step in. There is Indonesia, there is Vietnam, there is Thailand, there is all the Malaysia, there are all the countries in Asia itself. Also, then there is Latin America, maybe Africa is a distant third. So we cannot take it for granted that we will get the investments that may move from China. We are in a good position because we have a good record of humanitarian rights, etc. So we have an advantage, but we need to seize the advantage. So the speech that the Prime Minister laid out that day, he spoke about India becoming self-reliant. He spoke about India becoming a bigger part of the global value chain. And he spoke about reforms in land, labor, liquidity, and laws as a means to make India more competitive. To be honest, after that, we've had 2 days of finance ministers' stimulus package in tranches. And so far, it is more on the liquidity. It is more on the liquidity side. We haven't yet seen the announcements towards land, labor, and laws. And these are the things that could become game changer for India to become a bigger part. So if you ask me today, what is the economic stimulus package done for manufacturing sector in India? I would say we are still waiting. What has happened so far is good in terms of giving more liquidity to the SME sector, reclassification of the definition of SMEs so people can grow a little bit without worrying too much about losing the benefits. One concrete step that already they have announced is the fact that that the government, for its procurement for tenders below 200 crores, they will not go global. They will have to take tenders only from Indian participants. That might open the doors for some more SMEs to participate. Honestly, I don't know the size of that market that is created by banning global participants from that. So this is where we are. If you ask me, what is the economic stimulus package done so far? I would say waiting with eager anticipation. And right now, it is the Prime Minister's speech that has given me more enthusiasm than the package actually announced. But it's still early days. It's still coming. So let us wait for it.
So thank you, sir, for your inputs. They were very valuable and insightful, and also long term. Because the Prime Minister's speech, what he spoke was more about vision, more about long term, and the Finance Minister's speech was more on liquidity, more on revival, or more on survival rather than revival right now. So thank you for your inputs, and quite valid. With this, I move to my second panelist, Mr. Sunil K Chaturvedi. So, hello. Sir, hello, sir. So, my question to you would be again the same. If I asked you to pick two main points, points from this economic stimulus, what would they be, and what could be the rationale behind choosing those?
Okay, thank you, Vikas, and fantastic to be with you and nearly 100 people I can see in the room. I can't see them, but I'm told the caption there says 100 people. So a big hello to all of you, 100 people. I believe they must be from all over different parts of the country. And I also assume they're all representing micro, small, and mini sector of our economy. Well, Mr. Srinivasan already covered many points. I'll not repeat those. So he talked about the line of credit and basically enabling credit flow, which must be the biggest worry in the minds of all the promoters of the small scale and medium. In fact, everybody, certainly small scale and medium scale companies, because they are so dependent on the flow of money is really like the blood flow within a human system. So whether it is by way of collateral-free loans, which are very important, or by way of relaxation of working capital norms, both for stressed and non-stressed companies, and few other measures also, like the PF, for example. It may be small, but when you look at very, very small companies, even 10% reduction in terms of the outflows can count a lot. in the larger scheme of things in their for their survival. So there are many such things which have been done, which are more, as Mr. Srinivasan said, by way of financial and credit flow related areas. But I would say there are others also within that gambit, if I may mention. For example, they've talked about giving support to the power sector. Now, that may not be directly related to the manufacturing sector, which is not power sector, but for all we know, the relief given to them could at least, in the least, ensure that there is continued power supply, because they will not be starved of their own inputs and other things, and so they don't disrupt. Because as you know, the power can be such a we take it for granted nowadays, but continued supply is very important. So things like these, he mentioned about the 200 crore limit to, I'm told somewhere, maybe that size of that, 200 crore thing is up to about maybe 15,000 crore a year, which can be pretty big overall kitty. I'm not very sure of that, but on one of the, the discussion panels, I was hearing that number being mooted. Be that as it may, these are some of the measures which the government has taken to allay the fears of credit availability by and large, as one thing. The other part which the government has done, which was announced yesterday, is largely to do with the mitigation of, or let's say relief for migrant workers. Now, we know that of this 100 million figure that you spoke of as the employment in the micro, small and mini sector, a large part of that is, really migrant workers. Whether they are permanent or contractual, whole lot of them have been disrupted very badly. They are also the people who do not have much savings, hardly any to talk of, so they really live from day to day or paycheck to paycheck. And therefore, this mitigation, whether it is by way of providing them with ration support, food support, which are the basic necessities, or as we are told, maybe today or tomorrow, they will announce something to do with their living quarters, which means government providing some kind of a support where these people can be assured in some way of a roof on their head. Because once you are a migrant worker, it's very important that one is food, the other is somewhere to stay. So these are, I would say, this apart from the credit flow thing that we spoke about, the second thing is this, mitigating the difficulty which the migrant workers are facing, including, of course, the railways, which is stepping up by special train services to ferry the migrant workers. Of course, I personally feel the good thing is that rather than giving money in the pocket of people, it has been provided by way of relief of some kind or the other. Because once you have money in the pocket, there is that much of reluctance to maybe, once you have come back, why do I move back? So I would say that many people, many may not move back even now. That's a big worry. It's a big possibility and a big worry. But at least from the policy standpoint, this is a good measure taken, that it gives an incentive for people to move back to work. Now, apart from that, to my mind, one very big and most important announcement which has been made, both in line with the Prime Minister's uplifting speech referred by Srinivasanji, which was, I think, very inspiring, very uplifting. The fallout of that is the definition of micro, small and mini, I think is very, very important. As I see, if India has to step up, this really small and micro, which has served India very well all this while, has to become, it has to be left. It has to be overcome. We have to change the orbit. And I think this definition is very, very important. I'll elaborate on that later as to why I choose this as something which is very important. So therefore, I would say that, of course, very big possible announcement which everybody is expecting, and Srinivasan ji also mentioned, which is still to be announced, but it is something which is almost expected now, which is the land and labor, particularly labor reform. As we all know that this is something which has been holding back India's manufacturing sector and other industry and business progress to a great deal. And if, I mean, there couldn't be in that time in the life of nations, there come time where, things can be reset. And among various measures for resetting the ecosystem norms and, various definitions and processes, this is something which is, in my view, very, very important. So I think these are the 3 or 4 very important things that the announcements have been made so far, some which have been made, others which are still to be announced, but we are expecting those. Would you like me to elaborate right now on some of these, or as to why, for example, this definition is important, or would be, I don't know what the format you want to follow in this.
So might be we'll come again with a question and then let. So thank you for your inputs. It was very interesting, and particularly I also agree with your point of view about definition of MSMEs, because I think the definition was too obsolete. 2006, the value of money and the value of the investment that was defined at that point of time in 2006 is not valid in 2020. And I was seeing for last 2-3 years continuously people and also government was trying to change it. And then still I think there is a process left to change that definition. Although the decision has been made, there could be an administrative process or a legislative process that will change this definition. But I think still, there is time when this definition will be implemented. But it's a welcome step, and it was certainly necessary. Along with it, when the smaller companies, they become big, they would rather like to open one more company which is small to utilize the benefit rather than becoming even bigger. Of course it will be there at this point of time also with the new definition, but the width has increased. So thank you for your inputs. So I move to now Mr. Ashwin Pai, and he is from this high-tech industry, and he has good experience with consumer electronics and durable sector. So I would like to know from you, Ashwin, about what do you think is the takeaway for consumer electronics and durable sector in this economic booster announced by the government?
Thanks, Vikas. Hi everyone. A lot of the announcement that were made in the last 2 days by our finance minister, pretty much Mr. Srinivasan and Mr. Chaturvedi had explained how it impacts overall. To me, at a high level, before I start talking about the consumer electronics and durable sector, to me, the way I'm looking at this is, in the past, India had positioned it. Thank you, Dilip. Yeah, in the past, India had always positioned itself as a services economy and more of a consumption economy. The way things are being positioned right now, post Mr. Modi's speech on Atmanirbhar, I feel that now we are seriously focusing on, looking at the manufacturing side of it also, which is like a great balance. If you look at US originally was a manufacturing as well as services economy, but then once China took over manufacturing, it pretty much became a services and consumption economy. China is majorly a manufacturing economy. India started with its positioning as a services and consumption economy. I think taking a balance towards manufacturing, I think that's a right move, in the sense that there is good amount of employment that is generated by the services economy, because there is huge consumption here. We have people. There is agriculture that happens, that also is another big employer. I think then as we grow, rather increase efficiency in agriculture and services economy, you might end up ending up with a large pool of people without jobs, which means we need to look at manufacturing as our next bet. So I think betting on this manufacturing as a vision, right, Atmanirbhar vision, I think that's very interesting and a positive move. Now, let me start contextualizing it to what Vikas said as consumer electronics and durable sector. So to me, if you look at the entire sector, consumer electronics, the value chain can be bucketed into three areas. One is the high tech, which is the traditional electronics or the semiconductor chipset that goes into the that pretty much powers the consumer electronics, the gadgets that we use. Then there is the mid-tech or the mechanical or the moving parts typically that you will see in an electronic gadget. And finally, you have the low-tech, which is casing, the plasticware, and the frameworks, etc. that goes into these products. So if you look at the play of India, especially in high-tech electronics, India pretty much has no play. Pretty much everything comes from China, maybe a little bit from US also for high-end electronics. But the traditional consumer electronics, it's pretty much China. But when you are looking at the mid-tech and the low-tech, there is a significant India play here, because these are all typically those MSMEs who have a major play in this space. So if you look at what this stimulus of 3 lakh crore for MSME as a government-backed loan, so I think this stimulus is very key for this space, the low-tech and mid-tech space of consumer electronics and durables goods, to keep them afloat for next 6 to 12 months, which is a major move, because it's like Jaan to Jahan kind of scenario. You have to save these MSMEs first before you start growing them, creating a larger ecosystem of bigger players, complex product line players, etc. So that's one major key takeaway for me in the context of consumer durables. The other one may not be explicitly announced, but there are feelers around it. It need not be a package, but more in the context of policy. The government is giving indications that it is willing to look at some of the policy reforms, like labor laws and land reforms, etc., which are very, very critical for the manufacturing sector overall. So these are the two things that that are striking for me in this economic booster. Over to you, Vikas.
So thank you, Ashwin. And these were valuable inputs, especially if we see our own platform. There are a lot of people who want to invest in manufacturing right now. We get a lot of inquiries where people are interested. They want to know which sector to enter to, and which areas, which products to target. And one of the key areas where people are looking because of the recent buzz is consumer electronics, and also in general electronics components. But there have been mixed reactions from people, because it is also seen that the raw material required to manufacture these kinds of products is not available in India. And unless and until we make that ecosystem to have this manufacturing in India, it would be difficult for us to shift. Because if in China, it's a big industry, and they have that ecosystem from raw material to end product. But if we do not have that ecosystem in India, it would be difficult for us to create an advantage, to grow, and to make profitable SMEs or profitable ecosystems. So, what is your take on this point, Ashwin?
All right. When you look at the supply chain, right, there are two parts to it. One is the raw materials itself, and the second one is finished components, right? Let me talk in the context of consumer electronics to give a perspective. Now, when you say raw materials, there are especially in the consumer electronics industry, or let's say battery, right? Battery is one thing that is going to be a big deal for anything that is electrical vehicles, battery powered homes, etc. So where do these raw materials come from? Most of these raw materials come from countries like Bolivia, right, for a battery, right? What happens is it's very important that even at a political level, we forge alliances with those countries. For example, China is already there in Bolivia and establishing strategic level relationships, just to ensure they have their supply of whatever that needs to make a battery. Similarly, they have been having a lot of focus on other raw material rich countries in Africa, Even in Australia, they have done many investments, but then there are some noises around, the unease, as Mr. Srinivasan said, there is the unease with China. So that is there, but these are some of those, probably COVID is that opportunity to shake up that equation, right? Where India starts talking to Bolivia in a big way, talking to the African countries, even Australia in a big way to forge strategic alliances with the countries to ensure we have those raw materials, because without those raw materials, you won't be able to manufacture even the components that goes into a consumer electronics product. Now, coming to the finished goods, right? Let me just give you a data to get a perspective, right? So if you see the global consumer electronics industry, it is close to, I mean, when I say consumer electronics industry, that includes your laptops, tablets, smartphones. It was around 750 to 800 billion US dollars back in 2019. And of this entire market, China supplied or exported close to 380 to 400 billion dollar worth of electronics. Clearly, this is huge, a huge dependency on China when it comes to, which is truly the case why China is the global shop floor. But good thing is that, I mean, good or bad, COVID happened, and then this has been an eye opener for the global companies. Hey, that what, my supply chain is heavily dependent on China. If China switches off for 2 months, 3 months, my end consumption is completely disrupted because of this supply chain disruption. So what do? They are looking at de-risking their future. So plus there is that geopolitics playing into playing around. All the countries are looking at China with great unease. So the question here is, do a country like India stand a chance? I think yes. The answer is yes. But as Mr. Srinivasan said earlier, we do have strong competition coming from Vietnam, Thailand. So it's very, very important that we move really fast across multiple fronts, be it policy reform, strengthening the capital markets, availability of skilled labor. It's not just simple manufacturing line. In consumer electronics, you need to have skilled blue-collar workers. That's very critical. So how we can, I mean, in the next 6 to 9 months, in my mind, are very critical, because US is going into election, and there will be a lot of that elevated pitch around, positioning China with a negative, painting a negative picture of China, I would say. So probably we should use this moment and position ourselves, India, as the next best alternative during this 6 to 9 months. If we don't use this next 12 months, I think we would have permanently missed that manufacturing bus. Over to you, Vikas.
Okay, so thanks for it, and definitely the SMEs who are there in this webinar will benefit from the inputs that you have given. So coming to SMEs again, so my question would be to Mr. Chandramouli Srinivasan on. We were talking about liquidity coming into picture and helping the SMEs. My question is it enough? Will the small and medium scale industries in manufacturing sector be able to sustain with the support that has been provided? And if not, what needs to be done more?
Okay, so this is a difficult question to answer on a macro level. Really, it has to be SME to SME has to figure out whether he's got the right amount of capital required to run his business. But I want to make a small clarification here, or say a comment here. See, we are trying to compete with China because that's our closest say model on whom we can model ourselves. And China is extremely, one of the strengths of China has been over the years that they super specialize in their manufacturing capacities and super specialize in their entire value chain. So they build huge capacities. Almost, I mean, every industry, they build huge capacities, and that enables them to have extremely low cost of production because the scales are so huge. So sometimes small is not so good, and we somehow keep on emphasizing on small industries, and we put caps on the limits when they are entitled to be classified as small, etc. And as Chaturvedi ji also said, there is almost a disincentive to grow beyond a certain limit because of fear of losing that status of being small, and then you keep on having mushrooming more and more units just so that everybody can be small.
I think we lost Mr. Chandramouli Srinivasan's voice. I think he's disconnected. So, Mohit, can you try to connect with him offline? In the meantime, I will move to our next panelist with any question. Yeah, so I'll move to Mr. Chaturvedi, and I would like to know from you what is it for auto SMEs in auto sector to to gain from this economic stimulus that has been announced.
Okay, so I'll answer that in two parts. I mean, rather than just talking of auto ancillaries, but also generally the SMEs. Of course, automotive sector in India forms almost 38 to 40% of overall manufacturing. So therefore, it's a pretty large player. But auto ancillaries are almost completely dependent on their OEMs. It's a supply chain which is so seamlessly interconnected. So unless there is a car being sold, you cannot really be suppliers cannot really be functioning beyond a point. Of course, there is an aftermarket. So you do manufacture for the replacement parts, which are used by the service stations when you get your car either maintained or repaired. But as you know that even the transportation on the road has been badly affected or almost nil. So therefore, even that, in any case, you have not been functioning, and we do not know even this opening up of the lockout, how much time it might take for demand lines to become seamless again. It could take pretty long time. Overall, in the SME sector, as far as the automotive sector is concerned, there is also this very big issue of overall supply chain disruptions. If you have materials which were originally coming from, were being imported, for examples, even if it's a very small part of a component that you are making, but you cannot really make the component without that if there is a disruption. So therefore, there are a whole lot of specific issues which have to be dealt with as far as the automotive sector particularly is concerned, because being a large ticket item, discretionary consumer demand item, as they say, the country might take quite some time to get back to their old regular buying habits. As it is, even before COVID, the sector was facing huge difficulties. Those who are from that sector would know what I'm talking about for various reasons: insurance cost going up and NBFC crisis. So there was no liquidity available for financing of automobiles, etc. So therefore, this COVID thing has come for the auto sector as a double whammy, really. It is on top of already very difficult conditions the auto sector was going through on top of this. But having said that, there is, the larger part which applies to automotive sector also. If companies start looking at growing their size, and not just size, but also focus on product quality and productivity, then there could also be much larger opportunities in the global supply chains. So, which means that even if India takes longer for a particular sector to the demand to come back in any large way, one could also look at the exports as a sector to apply for. In fact, overall, not just for the auto, but I would say picking up on this or following up on this theme of size. I mean, small is beautiful, but believe me, size does matter. And size matters on various counts. Economy of scale, for example. Once you have size, you can go for economies of scale. When you go for economies of scale, and if you succeed, then there are better margins available to you. Better margins means that you can reinvest. And when you reinvest, not just in size expansion, but reinvest in innovation, in R&D. I mean, I'll give example of Germany. I was absolutely shocked. First time, I think must be 1981, 82, 83, as far back as that. And I saw very small companies in Germany, Stuttgart and those areas, family owned very often. And just if you ask them total number of manpower, 75, 80, 100, 200, as small as that. But their product, very proudly, they would say they are world-class, global, exporting to all over the world. And even today, they continue. I think the most innovative products keep coming out from the manufacturing sector. They keep coming out of Germany, which means what? That there is so much more of value addition. If we do not do that, then you are left to fight within the commoditized space where steel products, even though you have designed, produced, but they will be sold pretty much at the rate of जो कहते हैं लोहे के भाव में आप बेच रहे हो उसको. So that's commoditization which happens. And I know, I mean, having worked very closely and seen the small and medium sector in our country as our suppliers, and also we as suppliers to larger companies, a whole lot of them suffer from this issue of commoditization. So as a country, with this new reset of our ambitions, and coupled with the the advantage which in a dubious way because of this COVID crisis has come our way by way of reduced confidence of the world in China, and India being the only large country where people can bank upon. I think our small, medium, and sector companies who are present today here in the seminar, they must take a very deep look at increasing their size by increasing and parallelly increasing their focusing on quality and productivity, which in any case will also require skills, which was mentioned very rightly by Ashwin, because quality and productivity cannot be attained without skilled manpower. So therefore, it is as good a time as any to start focusing on skills. So top leadership in all these SME companies must focus, number one, becoming bigger, better, and the best. Bigger and better will perhaps give them continued foothold in the Indian market, the local market. But when you try to benchmark with the best, then you get a foothold into the global markets, which are really huge, really very big. Even though, for example, I'll give example of automotive sector. Even though it is very large in India, India has, I think, in many cases, second or third or fourth in various categories of automobiles in the world. And yet, this large sector, overall, if you look at the global scheme of things, you are less than few percentage of the total automotive trade in the world. So that shows the huge headroom for growth even on the global front. Now, with these policy measures which have come our way or about to come our way, and definition changes, etc., I think the leadership in small SME companies must start thinking differently, start thinking in terms of quality and productivity, and followed by investing in innovative products and therefore R&D. And when we talk of skills, these are not skills just on the shop floor. Those are very obvious. They are very visible. But there are skills at all levels across all functions, whether they are skills for sales, skills for marketing, skills for designing, right? Skills for how well you do your accounting, and most importantly, skills for leadership, which means managerial skills. Unless we look at upgrading skills at all levels across all functions, this will only remain a dream that you can actually start adding value to what you do. So these are some of the things that I would say, which are, I think, an opportunity has kind of knocked at India's door almost, not unexpectedly, so to say. And as Ashwin was saying, that the window of opportunity available is just about maybe a year or two, no longer. The world is not going to be waiting for India forever. So this is one last time, I think, which our leadership at our SME companies must step up the game and respond to the call given by the Prime Minister, and take advantage of all the measures which have come our way to the best of their ability. One last thing I will mention on this point is that while focusing on becoming bigger, better, quality, productivity, local leadership, going for exports, becoming innovative through R&D, etc., improving our skills, while doing all that, in these times, very, very important that we must keep an eye on costs. India is known for its frugal engineering, so frugal ways. But I mean, my feeling is that while large corporations, successful corporations from India have adopted frugal methodologies very, very well, it has not really percolated down to the SME level. Frugal doesn't mean low quality. Frugal means maintaining quality, maintaining productivity, and yet being cost effective. And one of the ways to practice frugality is to differentiate between what is needed and what is desired. It is very important, particularly at these difficult times, very, very difficult times, that everybody, especially the small and medium companies, to focus on what is bare minimum required and not go for fancy things. I mean, we can travel, just as an example illustration, we can go from point A to point B in an okay kind of a condition. You could also go travel point A to point B in some kind of a, extra comfort, maybe even luxury. But then the question is luxury really important at this stage? So fancy luxury can wait for some time. Very, very important to focus on cost. Over to you, Vikas. If there is anything specific, then I can take that.
Okay, so thank you for your inputs, and I really like the leadership one that you had spoken. And leadership, from my point of view, is also about resilience. So whenever you go down, do you have the courage to bounce back? And that's the biggest form of leadership required at this point of time, not just from the government, not just our leaders, but also from SMEs, owners, people who are leading the organization. So thank you for your inputs. I hope Mr. Chandramouli is back.
Yeah, I'm back now.
Okay, so sir, we heard you about that higher volumes, and for which China has built up their manufacturing, and because of that big high volume, global volume, they are able to meet the cost at they set the price, or they set the cost at that level that anybody else in the world is not able to meet. So we were from there when we lost you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and then I heard some of the other speakers make the valid point that you can either be in that, let's say, commodity business or large volume business, and there we will find it very difficult to come up to China's level because they've already built the scale, unless the world takes a view now that they want to de-risk and move away from China, in which case we can get part of it, and then we must have good scale. Or as somebody else said, we have to use niche, we have to use R&D, we have to use something different and come up with products that are so good that even if they cost a little bit more, they give more value at the end of the day to the end user. So we have to get more into the value part of the chain rather than just operate on volume. So there are two ways, well, both ways actually, in order to become competitive. You asked me about whether financing, whatever has been announced so far for the SMEs, is enough or not. And one of the things I want to say is, of course, it's never enough. You can always ask for more, and everybody wants more credit as possible. But one of the things I've found with SMEs is generally, and this is just a general thing I would say, is that they're thinly capitalized. They do not have enough. They do not have enough of their own equity in. And then what happens? They become over leveraged on loans. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then they become a little over leveraged on borrowings, and then your capacity to bear shocks like this, where you've got no business running for 2 months, comes down. So one of the things that I would say is, while the government will do and should do and is doing things to improve the credit flow to the SMEs, at the same time, I urge the SMEs to also capitalize themselves well in terms of their own equity. Because again, something I find with SMEs is that once they start making some profits, rather than reinvesting in the same business, they take it out and invest it somewhere else. And in that way, they don't grow enough and they make themselves vulnerable to shocks like this. So, I think this pandemic has taught us that we need to cover through enough liquidity in the balance sheet of every business, enough money that you can sustain for, say, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. I mean, that may be an exaggeration, but each one has to find his own level, that you need to have that safety capital in the business and not somewhere outside invested in some other non-business related asset. So I think that's one of the points I wanted to talk about, the financing. Over to you, Vikas.
Okay, so thank you for your input, sir. So I think we are closing towards 5. So I would like to wrap up saying that whatever we discussed is the economic stimulus that has been provided by the government is the immediate liquidity relief that has been given for sustenance. But in long term, all of us, including the policymakers, the SMEs, have to think long term. How do we build capabilities? How do we show leadership? How do we grab the business when it is compared to other companies, be it China, be it Thailand, be it Brazil, or any other country? So it's more about long term than short term liquidity. So whatever is done is good. So now I would like to invite questions from people who would be interested to ask. They can ask to a specific panelist, or they can ask a generic question also.
Vikas,
So sir,
Vikas,
sir,
just give me a minute before we get to questions. There are just
right,
a couple of small, quick points that I want to make, which will just complete, things that I thought they are. You talked of specifically auto sector, for example, and I gave some
right,
general thing to merge it along with the overall SME sector.
right,
There are several school of thought which is saying, there may be increased demand for automobiles after the post-COVID because people don't like to, social distancing while on the travel may mean that you might require personal, transportation more than ever before, etc. But only time will tell. Second is, of course, electrification, which is happening in a big way all over the world. So India has to follow. So therefore, all the SMEs in the sector have to follow these mega trends in their sector and take appropriate action. And one of the actions would be that you must hedge your bets, in other sectors also. And I'll give an example, not of an SME, but a large part player in the automotive sector, that is Bharat Forge, for example. They have been, very big in automotive sector, really very big, several billions of dollars, maybe about $8-10 billion corporation, but they leverage their manufacturing capability in forgings, for example, and are a very big player in defense sector now, including making part for Bofors gun, etc. So similarly, you can have a parallel situation at each level. Smallest of SME must also look at proactively and not depend almost entirely on their traditional sector, the automotive, because there are uncertain times without any doubt. This is one point. And the second point that I would say is that while we talked about everybody to aspire now to become bigger, better, and best, and I'm sure many of these 100 sitting in the room would actually end up becoming that over the next few years' time. But statistically speaking, despite effort, there may be situations where you are just not able to carry forward because there is the impact of this whole unprecedented situation is such that you just cannot, best of your efforts or not. You should be willing to look for collaborative efforts with others in the sector, which means mergers and acquisitions. Those who are big enough within this band may look at stressed companies, bail them out for your own advantage and their advantage, and those who are small must look for either collaborating or maybe even selling out to people. But I would not say that should be the, on the rebound. First and foremost, we must all endeavor to try to become bigger and better. I thought I'll just make these two small points. Now the questions, as you were saying.
so if anybody is interested to ask questions.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Mr. Vikas, I have a question. Specifically, I just want to know the relief package, which is about 20 lakh crore. I want to know from where will the government will obtain this money from?
Okay, so it's a very obvious question, and also asked by many people. So yesterday I was just discussing with few of my friends, and they were also asking that from where will this 20 lakh come from. So as I said during the starting, that there was no room to borrow money for India. We had already planned 12 lakh crores of borrowings, so there was no room. But whatever has been given is not in the form of money. It's more in the form of relief. You talk about sovereign guarantees. You talk about collateral free loans. You talk about TDS, which will be given, tax, which will be given later. It's all about giving relief rather than giving money. So it's more of bringing liquidity, measures which are bringing liquidity rather than pumping in and giving money to the people. So that's where the money is coming from.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Because I wanted to ask Mr. Chaturvedi one question. Basically, I'm looking for that how do we now of rule the automotive, especially machinery industry, is a lot heavy increase. And as far as apart from the factories, system which can give them a leeway to continue on production, because a lot of I'm from tractor industry, and fortunately I think Mr. Chaturvedi, when he was with the ASDC, I had some interactions in that panel also. But what is the situation now? The supply chain systems what we are now proposing, and all these now lockdown, and all those things will not be eased at least till months. How do we now, especially in production line, and then the finish should move to the market?
You know, the voice was, completely broken. So I was only trying to get bits and pieces of what you were saying, Dilip. Yes, I do remember you in one of those forums, as you recall rightly. But your question, as if I've understood,
Yeah.
Machinery, are you saying that machinery which is locked up and not being used, how do you get that to working conditions again? That's what you're saying?
Agriculture must. No, agriculture tractor which is having heavy inventory has finished good inventory. Just be this down. Now
Mr. Dilip, actually your voice is cracking and it's very difficult to understand what you are saying. So if you can send a message in the chat box, and we will connect you to Mr. Chaturvedi offline, because absolutely we are not able to hear what you are saying. So yeah, it's very difficult. So if you can send, just put a chat.
Just let me try out.
Just put a chat over there, and then we will communicate it to Mr. Chaturvedi. So okay, so thank you, and I think with this we can conclude this particular section.
Sir, I have one question.
Vikas, there are a few questions that are there in the chat, and I need to ask them from participants' point of view. So
Okay.
Can I ask?
So if other panelists are fine with extending the time, it's okay. So Sunil, Ashwin, and Mr. Chandramouli, if it is fine, we can extend. Is it okay?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, fine. Please go ahead.
Okay, so sir, there's a question from Mr. Anit B. He wants to ask that what do you think about open source hierarchical temporal memory algorithms to understand all car driving parameters?
I think the question is not related to the topic.
Okay.
I think he's talking about the autonomous driving, right? Autonomous vehicles.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, well, to the best of my knowledge, a whole lot of these algorithms are being developed by various companies themselves. So Google is developing in Waymo, Tesla is developing, every one of the established companies are also developing. And there is a lot of intellectual property. They may be all similar because ultimately they are solving the same problem with almost similar inputs. But specific algorithms, I think, are under they are patented stuff, intellectual property of individual companies. They are not. Open source is more to make a beginning, then improve, but not so much for deploying.
Okay. Okay. So there is one more question from Ms. Kiran Ranade. She wants to ask that with this pandemic, all countries will invest in health industry. What kind of efforts are going on?
When she says health, is it more about medical, or is she also talking about pharma?
She has just mentioned health industry, sir.
So I presume that she is talking about medical equipment and pharma, which is, of course, which is growing, and the future is to grow. But then, whatever opportunities have come because of the pandemic is not long term, and that was the whole focus right now for everybody. That whatever is happening, whatever spurt in demand is happening because of the pandemic is not long term. We should focus on our competence level. We should focus on what we are doing, what is our core competence, and try to develop businesses around it.
Okay.
Because if I may answer that question a bit.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, because so my opinion on that is, I think India's image in the world has clearly gone up as a very reliable partner in the healthcare industry. So in the case of pharmaceuticals and drugs, already we were supplying a major quantity to the whole world. And now we have stepped in as a very reliable producer of drugs in a big way and supplying the world. I think where we have to protect ourselves is that even though we are such a big supplier of drugs to the world, for the basic ingredients, we were depending on China. So that should be avoided. We should have those APIs also made in India. Healthcare, again, Indian doctors are very well regarded all over the world. So I think this is an industry that clearly India has a natural advantages to grow. We must make use of the opportunity. Thank you, Vikas.
Mohit, any other questions?
Sir, I have one question for Mr. Chandramouli.
Yes, please.
Sir, I wanted to ask how will this economic stimulus from the government is going to help in generating demand economically?
Okay. Vikas, should I answer?
Yes, sir. It's for you only. He has said that it's for you.
Okay. So any time that the government gives so much money into the economy, money has a huge multiplier effect. And that's how the economy grows. So many people have asked this question saying that, oh, the government is only giving loans. It is not really giving one-time handouts to people. And therefore, this is not spurring demand. And I don't agree with that view. Any kind of money that is injected into the system will create a multiplier effect. So for example, if you are giving more loans to SMEs which have today completely shut down business because of lack of capital, hopefully they will get loans to restart their business. If they restart their business, they will of course consume more because they will get more income. They will also employ more people. Those people will consume more. So this is a multiplier effect. And today I think they have announced some major steps for agriculture. I haven't heard them yet. So again, somebody can say, if agriculture is supported, how does that help the manufacturing sector? And again, my answer is the same. Anywhere in the economy, if you start to create demand, you start to create jobs, you start to create employment, you start to create incomes in the hands of people, ultimately it will get consumed. And that will result in a multiplier effect. we are all interrelated in one way or the other. So my income, my expenditure is somebody else's income, and therefore he will go and spend it in the market somewhere. That becomes income for someone. This is the multiplier effect. It's normally proved that 1 rupee injected has 100 rupees multiplier effect by the time the number. So that's how the GDP grows. So I think demand will definitely be spurred anytime. The important thing is that the money has to get channelized into the right place. That is, the quality of spending is more important than the quantity of spending. I mean, the quantity is important, of course, but the quality is equally important to make sure that you get the multiplier effect and demand starts rolling again. Thank you, Vikas.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. It also means we have to change the point of view we look for.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Vikas sir, I think there are too many questions in the chat, so we'll have to take another 1 hour for that. Should we connect these participants one-to-one after the webinar?
Yeah, so might be we can we can connect later on, and we can connect offline, so that would be good. So because the number of participants is also decreasing from 100 to 40 that I can see.
Yeah.
Because when question is answered, so most of the time the person who has asked the question is the one who is interested in listening towards it, not
Yes,
others.
sir.
So for the benefit of everyone, might be we can conclude now this session. So anyone who would be any of the panelists would be interested in concluding just in 1 or 2 sentences on what we discussed, and what could be.
Mr. Vikas, I'm eager to share one more view. Can I continue?
Okay, just as an exception, sure. Yes, sir.
You related to just now I asked you related to health industry in a global market. The reality is until today we were just importers of not only this one health industry related products also. Even the X-ray machines used to come from outside. Why can't we develop and why can't we explore this opportunity? Because day by day this is a one pandemic. Now, day by day, few more viruses may expected, and people are thinking like that. So for all this one, people will be more cautious. And if you go for Indian perspective, earlier we used to give only about 2 to 3% of our GDP for a health industry. But now government is seriously thinking for double or triple the investment in this field. So this is really a huge opportunity, and this will definitely be a big market for a local industry. And that is why I put up this question related to this one. And health industry is right from disposable up to X-ray machine or the disposal of a body. So this is a huge business, and that's why I asked you this question. If possible, do share on this one, and let's explore the opportunity on this one.
Sure. Thank you. It's a good input for all of us, because it's also an input for SME on where to develop competency. So thanks for that, and which could be the strategic or long-term areas where they could invest. So thank you for that. I was saying that if any of the panelists would like to conclude in 2 sentences on what we discussed or the concluding remarks.
So may I go first? Because
yes, sure.
So yes, India is, as everybody has said, standing on a sort of a great moment possibly that we can capitalize on. I mean, a pandemic is not the best of circumstances to call it a great moment, but still using that as an opportunity for us to change courses. So a 1991 kind of moment is what we are standing at. We need to grab that opportunity and go. And to me, one of the biggest things as a country that we need is today the right attitude and the right positive frame of mind and spirit. Unfortunately, I'm very saddened as a patriotic Indian when I see a lot of media only trying to find holes in whatever is happening and trying to find problems and obstacles. I think we need to get out of that mode, and we need to, all of us together, come and say we will take India forward and we will make it happen. I think that is the biggest message from what I have from my side. Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you. Yeah.
I would like to ask one question.
Okay.
Regarding food industry. How would food industry perform post pandemic? Like, would people be interested in buying those products outside food, or how it should be taken care of in the future?
I'll give my perspective on food industry. So food industry is something which directly is proportional to population and demographic. So, and there's nothing much that somebody can do about demography. We can better look at the data that we have and see it and look at it and take corrective actions. So what I see is there's tremendous potential in food industry in India because of the growing consumption, growing number of people, growing population and demographics. So it's a long-term business, and it is very well manifested in our platform. So I would say the biggest or fastest growing sector in our platform where SMEs want to invest, want to diversify, want to grow is food sector. So it's a good sector, and also the amount of investment required to enter this sector as compared to other sector is quite low. So that's the reason why more and more people are interested in entering food sector. It's a growing sector and it will grow in long term.
Thank you.
Vikas, I can add some thoughts here. If you look at the overall food industry, you can split it across processed food and then, food that you consume in restaurants, right? When it comes to processed food, I think that will see a significant uptake. I think we are seeing already in the last 4 weeks of lockdown, people have been consuming a lot of processed food, ready to eat stuff. So that definitely will see uptake, but that's a manufacturing heavy industry, a lot of quality requirement, etc. That's not easy to be implemented straight away. There are few players, right, like Britannia, ITC of the world, Haldiram, etc. The other one is your restaurant space. Definitely that is going to have a major challenge in the COVID era next 18 months. But I think takeaways and home delivery will continue. There might be more of that. Same restaurants which they're having in dining, they might cut down on in dining. They might increase their footprint into home delivery. So food tech is something that I believe will pick much faster than in dining. In dining will be in a southward direction for at least the next 18 months. That's my view.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you all of you for joining us, and also thanks to all panelists who could make it to the discussion, and thanks for your valuable inputs. Thank you. And you may contact us at, you may contact me in person at vikas.manrat@solutionbuggy.com. And yeah, so you can register at www.solutionbuggy.com, and we will be there to assist you in any of the aspects, in any of the challenges that you face.